Well, the mayor had told me about somebody. He had sued the city because of age something and was over $500,000.
And so, yeah, or was. No, concentrate on the swear. She goes to the just one day. Maybe it's over.
Maybe. Here in Mansfield, you know.
I got a lady.
Go back and be Richard Stewart.
Yeah, he's 17.
You know what?
I don't know.
Yeah, she doesn't.
I don't have any
For her, it's
So while I'm watching TV and stuff, you don't want to go about
I found like over into Chattanooga. I went.
This stuff.
So I followed. So when I I'd rather get up there. Love it.
That job.
Can you do that? That's crazy. I'm like, it's not like they're like city. Already. I'm like, it's 4:30.
When I was in our office, we used to be down.
I don't.
Actually.
He's just the couple. I don't see it. Advise my business. Yeah. Let's see.
It won't let me join. You said we have the only thing oh, well, there's the Shelbyville public.
Yeah, he said that one doesn't have to.
I really don't want that because it's insecure, but
we'll get started in just a second. We're trying to get some Wi-Fi hooked up. Oh, well, we will go ahead and get started then. So, welcome to the BZA meeting. We will start with the roll call.
Chairman Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Novell. Here. Member Perkins.
Here.
Member Armstrong.
Here.
And Member Patterson. Here. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Ms. Ethel Patterson. She is our new member, was appointed by the mayor at our last city council meeting. And I think Ms. Noel was at our last BZA meeting. She's our new council member for Ward 3. She'll be representing the council on this board.
Nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you. Welcome aboard.
And also, I'd like to let everybody know that we are being recorded and live streamed on Facebook now. We're working on trying to get all of our minutes to be live streamed and have backup recordings. So if anybody wants to watch them later, they can go back and do that.
Well, we do have a quorum, so the next item is the approval of the agenda, and I believe now the time to defer that one item.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, if we, 810 North Main Street, Scott Jackson is representing the business owner Blake Nutter, and they have requested a deferral until February because they are still working through some contractual agreements.
So we need a motion.
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So we will entertain a motion to defer item 7A on the agenda till next month.
Make a motion.
Got a motion, second?
Awesome.
I have a second. All in favor of deferring item 7A?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any other changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
And we will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll make a motion.
Got a motion, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is constituents' comments. Anyone from the crowd have anything to say?
Have anyone signed up?
On to old business, there is none. So new business, the only item left on the new business agenda is 1006 East Depot Street. Looks like it is a request for a variance. So
Right. Oops. Next one. Yeah, gotta wait for Kate, I think. There we go. There we go. 1006 East Depot Street. The application is for variance and the BZA is being asked to decide on whether the change from the existing non-conforming use to another non-conforming use is compatible within the zone district. If you look on the slide here, 1006 East Depot Street is this building here. It was constructed in 1971, and historically, it's been many things. It's been a grocer, it's been a fuel station, and then it's also been a little Quick Mart. And the applicant is requesting the restoration of the fuel station and the convenience market. All right, so I put this slide on just so that it would be fresh in mind as we go through the slides. The zoning district is R3, which is suitable for single-family residential. And when you see the next slides and you see the actual zoning area, you'll see where the residential area is and where the commercial areas are. It's currently a legal non-conforming use, and there's one error in my report. The former use was actually as some type of retail that was related to automobile and not a repair. And then the other one was a hair salon. Existing setbacks, building scale, they're all consistent with what would be our C3 zone, a little neighborhood business. Shelbyville Housing Authority is more consistent with the R4, but it is a legal nonconformity as well in the R3 zoning district. The proposed use, this proposal will create more traffic, more noise, lights, and smells. And really the impact is to South Maple Street, which is further east of this property, which is this house right here. So there's sufficient buffer from the apartment, it appears to be to mitigate any of these impact. The area behind it is all open space. So it's only this house that's potentially has negative impact. That house was constructed in 2009. So between 2004 and 2009 is when this zoning changed from a C2, which is inside here. Is that correct? Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong street here. So here's Depot Street. This is the location. And C2 back between 2004 used to be, looks like this. Sometime between there is when it actually changed to this, which is the R3 residential zoning district. And you can see throughout that area, you'll see a lot more commercial zoning district. Let me go back. Hey, lost it. This was, the survey was done by, and I know Rex no longer works there, but this was originally Rex Northcutt's survey of the building. And it pretty much still looks the same. And as I said, it was constructed in 1971. It was a convenience market around 1992, which is about the time period when 3 1,000-gallon gasoline tanks were removed on this northeast side. It was a grocer back in 1984, according to the research we performed, and then fuel service provided prior to 1992. And this is actually from the TDEC permit for the final approval of the underground storage tank, which was June 3rd, 1992. And there you see the island is still in evidence there. The building still looks the same. Yep, this was up until May 2023. And then going on to the current zoning, see is R3 throughout. This is the Shelbyville Housing Authority. And right underneath that East Depot Street is the property location, and then that house on the corner there.
We go back.
Oh, sure.
Slides, one more. Those houses in the background.
Yes.
That's the
Shelbyville Housing Authority, yes. I have another picture of it a little bit more further in the slide that shows those. So you see in our current permitted uses, R3 does not permit a convenience market where gasoline may be sold or a gasoline station. And because this is a review of the compatibility and whether or not this use is more compatible, I also included other additional information for, which is our future land use map. And I don't know how many are aware, but it is our guidance document for future development. And typically, whenever we look at rezoning applications or we tend to review both of them together because they coordinate and they cooperate together. So in the Depot Street corridor, which is what this property is, all along Depot Street, the development pattern that the city desires by the adoption of this map is C1, C2, C3. All the commercial zoning district where they're proposing or what they're proposing is permitted. And then current site conditions, this building is currently vacant, if I understand that correctly. It's impacted slightly by the floodplain on this side, on the eastern side, northeastern side. Current neighborhood, you see where the single family house was constructed in 2009. Maple Street, even though it is zone R3, it's actually it's not a land use, it's just a street, and the R3 wraps around here. But that's where that one photograph you see is that house in the background, or that apartment in the background. You have commercial across the street. Directly across the street are two duplexes. I don't know what Cindy's hair was. It's temporarily closed, but these are both duplexes. And then you have single family here. This is the only house that is adjacent to this property that is, the single family residential. There's that non-conforming apartment and backgrounds there. And this is that house on the corner that is the single family. So it's behind this tree. And actually, I believe that this is all more open. I'm not sure if this tree is there now, but it looks more open to the subject property. So under the 10 standards, the standards are there for, in order to just understand. Okay, I'll put that one, so I'll keep changing it. But so each of the standards has to be addressed or at least responded to, and it helps to guide the decision making.
Mr. Chairman, if I could I ask Tom a question
Yes.
before we go to that?
Yes.
Tom, I want to make certain that we're clarifying for the board. You're saying that this is currently a non-conforming use,
That's correct.
but your slide said that the building is vacant.
Yes. So
How long has it been vacant?
it has been. It's still within the time frame, which is 30 months for a commercial building. So in our standards for non-conforming structures, if a property is vacant for 30 plus months, over 30 months, then it is considered legally abandoned and it has to revert back to the underlying zoning, whatever that type of use. And in this case, it's R3. But this one has been, and maybe that.
What was its last use?
Yeah, when was it last used? Was it?
It was
Before we bought it,
So by, so 2023.
2024, so the full year 2024.
Okay.
What?
Oh, when you last bought it. And so when was, when did you purchase it?
Start of 2024 is when we purchased it. Then prior to that, it was a business that was.
Well, what kind of business? I'm getting to the
oh.
fact that you're saying, because I'm
It's a
not sure
choice.
why we're here for variance.
Sure.
For the, you said an expansion.
Yes.
That's what it says on the application.
Yes.
What do you mean by expansion? Is it going to be a larger footprint? Are they expanding the building, or are you just talking about a
The use
change
itself.
in use?
Yes, it's an expansion, whether or not because in, actually, if you can see it on the top here, this section of the code, which is Article 6, sorry, hold on, my glasses are on. Article 6.3C, under the definition of expansion, non-residential, non-conforming use, it may be expanded or changed to another non-conforming use upon determination by the Board of Zoning Appeals. That the new non-conforming use will be more compatible with the surrounding land uses and the existing non-conforming use.
And so when they talk about being more compatible,
Yes, and that's where whether or not the convenience store, the convenience market, and the gas station is a more compatible use for that neighborhood. Because
what was
within
it
it,
before again? What exactly was it before?
before it was a retail, some type of pinstriping for automobiles. And then the other use was, it was divided up. There were two tenants in there. The other tenant was a hair salon.
But the use closest to was a automobile? Is that what you're saying?
It was, I would say it's a retail because, let me see if I have a close-up view of.
It was a paint shop, paint shop.
Yeah, so it was a body supply, paint and body supply.
Paint and body supply.
Yeah,
So
which
did you go in and buy supplies and roll out, or did they do
They-
work there?
yeah, there was no work there.
No, there was no.
So it's retail
True
use.
retail store.
That's correct.
Okay, just making certain we have that on record, what it was.
Yes, and then this side here was the hair salon. So what they're asking for is that change from that retail service into something that is markets retail and then the gasoline sales.
Now, before we get into the variance, I have a couple questions.
Go back.
Previously, I think you said sometime between 2009 and 2012, the zoning changed.
2004 and 2009.
And that house on the adjacent lot was built in 2009, did I get that right?
Let's see. Yes, it was built in 2009. That's correct.
I would say it probably, because I've been on the BZA at least since around 2004, and I don't remember that being rezoned, so it must have been right at the 2004.
It could have been.
It must have been earlier. I'm curious as to why it was even rezoned,
Mhm.
because
Given the corridor.
you've got the corridor. And
Oh,
and that, I'm kind
yes.
of like, why are we asking for, why aren't we just fixing the zoning like it should be?
Well, here was the thing. So you see this big pocket right here, which is the R3 zoning between there. This sits in the middle. So rather than, certainly can apply for a rezoning application and take their chances on there. There are some issues with the, and I can go back to the survey, which might help. That the rear setback is non-complying with their current code for the setback. And that's really the biggest thing. Well, I shouldn't say that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing is that you have R3 on both sides, whether or not the planning commission sees it as spot zoning, that this was the more economical route to go.
I feel like that probably got rezoned that way to keep it from being spot zoning because someone wanted to rezone on the other side and Shelbyville Housing Authority wanted to zone the one, and this property kind of got wrapped up in that to make that decision easier back in 2004.
Yeah, you can see it matches exactly that distance there. That's Shelbyville Housing. There's the parcel, and then there's that house on the corner. I don't have even this 2004 map was an unsigned map. It was a copy of it. So, and that's stated in my report too. 2009 is the only one that I have as an executed map, and it shows it as having been rezoned.
So your future land use map also was, say, having it as a commercial
That's correct.
property.
That's correct. Our future land use map, I'm jumping around, so I'm trying to figure out where I placed it. Our future land use map shows it as a Depot Street area, and the desire is to have commercial along there. And this Depot Street is actually an arterial, so as a functional classification for the road, which means that it can support commercial development. And
In other words, all the circumstances surrounding this property indicate that it should be commercial development.
that's correct. That's correct. And that's why I placed the future land use map and comp plan in there to show that. Okay, is there any other questions? So I go on?
One question.
Okay.
I want to run something by you just for a minute.
Oh, sure.
And it's just maybe from my own knowledge. Could you speak more about the setback? You mentioned it, the setback of the facility itself.
Sure. So the rear setback, and this hasn't been confirmed, we don't have an updated survey, but I believe this setback falls short of the current setback for the C2 zoning district, or the commercial zoning district. And,
But that would be grandfathered in.
and that could be, but I just have to present those items to the commission, to this
There's no way
board.
to prove that it's not grandfathered in.
Oh, it's probably been yeah, I mean,
There's no way to prove it. It's really not an issue.
and that's fine, but that's not that's not my decision. That's me for presenting it.
Since you're new on the board, just a little education for you too. So each of the residential and commercial and industrial zones have certain setback requirements. So buildings have to be so many feet off of the property line.
I
And
think I
so,
actually read that.
okay, based off of the current C2 zone, the building is probably not conforming, but when it was built in 1971, that rule didn't exist, so.
Yes,
Thank
and because the applicant, because it's a significant investment to go through the rezoning process, since this was an additional pathway and it's more economical, because otherwise they would have had to present maybe additional information and have additional costs incurred with it. Let's see, I will skip forward. This is all within my report for the standards that which ones are satisfied and which aren't. And I mean, I can go through them, or I can get to the meat versus the potatoes here. So going back to the consideration, the biggest item really is just the impact to 245 Church Street, because there's significant buffer around there. And what I'll do in the next several slides is show how that it can possibly be mitigated for. So biggest thing is going to be the lighting. You have different types of lighting that can help, but a canopy is required for fuel station, and they're usually 25 feet. I think it's about 22 to 25 feet. Code requires that it's 13.6 from the highest projection. So that's why you see it elevated to that point. This type of lighting is what they consider non-cutoff. It has the highest glare. This one has a full cutoff and it's, shows it a little bit, less lighting spillover. But, and then the final one is the full cutoff. So that there's ways to mitigate it. This is all this is ways that it can be mitigated for. Especially when you're looking at that other house next door to it. There's many ways to mitigate the light pollution. Typically in the site plan, site development, process, in our site plan, photometric plans are required that shows the lighting and how far they actually extend out. You know, what the lighting levels are to the boundaries of the property. So there's ways that can be done, and you can see where lighting that is faced more inwards to the property versus outwards can help reduce glare, and also just looking at measuring the photometrics along the axis of the pump. No matter what, let me go back to this one. From that house, you're going to see lights above. It's a dark area right now, but the other ways to mitigate for it is to, in our design standards already, we can require that there's screening, like fencing, as well as landscaping to help buffer or help keep the light pollution and the noise and things like that from that property. The other item is that you're going to have these signs. So, and I'm not saying that these are required, but there's ways to mitigate that too by having not so high signs. And that's the end of it.
So Home Depot always got as far as service stations or fueling stations. We got one up around Thompson.
Yes.
And then we've got one at the end of 64 and 41A intersection out there on Home Depot itself, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir. Yes, and in our marketing study that was done by Retail Strategies, fuel station is one of the items that is in hot commodity.
What concerns me about this is, there's a high standard for variances.
That's correct.
And looking at, your list with the 7 standards, I think a couple of those were marked as did not meet, does not satisfy.
That's correct.
And
there were 3 that were not satisfied, but one of them was not fully satisfied unless it was determined that the proposed use is compatible or more compatible for the neighborhood. So of the number 10, which is the historic one, that one's not applicable. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4. The biggest one is that, this is surrounding a topographical conditions specific property. The property may be used now. Yeah, you don't have a limitation for that is any of those conditions that might prevent the actual use of the property. It might not be the use that they prefer, but it can be used, and that's why that one is not satisfied. Let's see. Actually, let me just read in, because I just shortened it so it wouldn't be that long. So number 2, the conditions upon which the petition for variance is based would not be applicable generally to other properties within the district. My comment is that, sorry, you know what? Oh, no, that's number 2 is satisfied. Number 3.
Could you speak to number 3?
This variance will not authorize activities in the zone. Okay. Let's see. So the variance will not authorize activities in a zone district other than permitted by this ordinance. This one, let's see. The past uses as convenience market, grocer, and fuel station. BZA is being asked to determine whether the change is non-conforming use as a market fuel sale is appropriate for that neighborhood. And the authority to make that determination is provided within the zoning ordinance. That's why I placed that one as a
Yeah, three and the other section seems to be in conflict.
3 in the other section.
Mhm.
In which section?
Section at the top. About being able to expand it from a use perspective.
This one up here?
Being no, what you put at the very top about being
Top
able
right.
to expand
Oh.
to another non-conforming use
Yes.
is granting someone a use that is not allowed in that district. It seems to be in conflict with number 3. Just stating that is what it
Sure,
seems to be.
sure.
I think we can read the other one.
Yeah, I don't particularly like the way that these standards are written.
I think that's something that we might not want, we want to look at.
Yes,
When you
and
look at it straight down, you would think that you can't give any type of variance on use. When you read
Yes.
number 3.
yes, and there are other standards that I have researched that may be a little bit better worded. Because
We need to take a look at that.
yeah, because these ones are well, they're problematic.
Well, so kind of going back to one of the questions that Ginger started with. Go back to your list of the zoning chart, the spreadsheet.
The zoning.
Uses allowed in C2 zones.
This one.
That one there. So, oh, that's really small. Any way to zoom in on that on the left-hand side? Just for example, I see laundry up there. If they wanted to open up a laundromat there, could they, without special exception or without a variance?
Anything that would be retail.
Anything
Yeah,
that fits in,
anything that fits into the retail. Yes.
but not necessarily anything that fits into the C2 zone. Is that
Yeah. So here's all the
Because let-
C2 zone.
my question is, what makes this a need to request a variance?
This is a request to determine whether or not that use is compatible or more compatible than was previous.
Wouldn't any use in the C2 zone be compatible because it's non-conforming in a C2 manner?
Whatever you're going. Isn't it retail? You could argue that it's.
You could certainly argue that.
I would argue that
And that's that is the thing, you know, my job is not to argue the point for the applicant. But I understand what you're saying, because there are a lot of uses that are on this chart that would seem like it actually, it appears like it would fit within that.
I would,
Is it,
And that's why I think that, because, well, let me just explain it this way, and maybe it would be helpful. For residential nonconformities, it's a lot stricter standards for any type of expansion. But for businesses, it's there's a lot more flexibility, and this is from the state level down, is that it's more flexible because of the interest in supporting businesses. And maybe that's what you're identifying, you know, what you're seeing as well, is that because the what's being asked is whether or not that is more compatible.
Tom, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I guess the question is, did you see a distinction between the retail establishments that were there before and this, which is a retail establishment?
Yes.
I guess, did you as planning director tell them they were not allowed as of right to go ahead and put that in there?
What I cautioned was that it may not comply with our code, and that this was because initially when it came in, they were requesting a rezoning. And I viewed rezoning as more problematic because of it being situated within two residential areas. So instead of proceeding with that route, since there is a provision within our zoning ordinance to do, have BZA review it to see, is it more compatible? That this may have been the proper course so that they're not spending significant amount of time and investment in doing so.
Okay, I guess my question is, as planning director, did you make an opinion whether or not this is a retail establishment and it would have to have a BZA approval? Because it was an
The short
expansion.
answer is yes.
You made that
I
determination.
made that determination that it may be problematic to say that it is a retail, a straight retail establishment. Since there were supplementary regulations that, whenever there's more regulations on top of just the base, I know that this is a use, but because there are other regulations that are on,
Due to the nature of it being a gas
gasoline
station.
station, yes. And I can tell you that the gasoline, the supplementary regulations for the gasoline, it meets, currently, they can meet those, requirements in the gasoline. There's not a lot of supplementary regulations, but I didn't make a distinction about whether or not it was, easier on the supplementary regulation side, so.
So if I had a piece of property that was zoned C2
Yes,
and I wanted to put in a gas station. So it's
Yes.
a vacant lot. Or say there is a building there.
yes,
If this was zone C2,
yes.
would there be any extra steps for them to go through?
Other
The
than
normal site
yeah,
plan and-
the normal site plan,
Setbacks
pre-planning
and flow.
committee, yep, meeting all the base standards. If it was abutting a residential, there's provisions in the design standards for it as well. So there's ways to mitigate for everything that they're doing. Because we have a lot of properties that are abutting, residential,
So
that are different zones.
my thoughts are, since there is no additional scrutiny or standard for gas station under the C2 zone compared to a laundromat, an auto supply store, a beauty salon.
Sure.
I don't really see the need and how can I say this on camera? The opening ourselves up to potential future issues with granting a variance.
Mhm.
Because I really don't see the need for a variance unless I'm missing something.
Okay.
I think Tom said that he didn't interpret it that way because they have supplemental regulations.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm looking at it is as a stricter, maybe a more conservative viewpoint. Because it is it's a non-conformity. And non-conformities have stricter boundaries than conforming. If it was a conforming lot, then, and it was being developed for the fuel station in the market, it would go through the regular process.
Well, and I would not argue that, but not counter that necessarily, but my comment on that would be, it was a C2 lot. And at some point, the city changed that, even though our own growth plan shows it as that. Is there,
And yeah, and that may be so, but it's not that way now, because you can also argue that it was purposely done, and that's why I purposely didn't talk about the history other than what it was in the past, because in my eyes, it's a supportable use.
I'm trying to figure out a way where we as a board can come together, if that's what the board agrees, and say, we think a gas station is fine there without granting a variance that's missing 3 of the 7 points.
Which you can't do.
Which we
It has to
can't
meet
do.
all of them in order to be able to give variance.
Mhm.
Tom, if you
I
can
don't
go
know.
back, yes, you do. Go back, yes.
I-
Go back to the very top.
Sure. To the top of what?
I want to see where it talks about the expansion of the use.
Oh,
This, with your 7 points. Right there.
What section is that in, Tom? I'm trying to find it.
it was 6.3. Oh, I know. I'm gonna go back here. Six point three C, Article 6.
I'm sorry, what again?
Article 6, Section 6.3 C, enlargement and expansion.
3C.
What I was going to say about the, I understand that you're supposed to meet the standards, but there was actually an application that came through in 2023 that didn't meet all standards as well.
Still, that's not, you know.
I know, I did,
The ordinance is written where all of those findings have to be met.
okay.
Or, well, and I mean, what we've always, at least since I've been on the board, is helped to try to do is if there's a reason why one of them isn't, be able to articulate why
It's
we're
irrelevant to
deviating
the
from that.
case.
Which if there's 1 out of 7, then that's okay, but if there's 3 of the 7, then that makes it a little bit, again,
Sure.
I feel it opens the city up.
And maybe, this is more, because that section of the code, 6.3C, specifically says that the Board of Zoning Appeals can review this to see if it is, more compatible. Maybe that's not a variance from the use, because.
Now, if that's all we're doing, then
And maybe it is my fault for misnaming it, because there was an application that was made that had, and this was 1000 Cowan Street, where, and it was a problem that was created in the past, similar to this, maybe this one was too.
And I think if the zoning codes allows to, us to review the decision on, yes, it's a non-conforming use, it's going to stay a non-conforming use, that's still within the same classification that meets with the growth plan, still with the same classification as what the prior non-conforming use is.
Yes.
If the zoning plan allows for that, then I'm perfectly fine with it. Understand, if you've got, if you've got a car, a place that sells paint for cars, and then you're going to turn around and put a factory there, you can't do that because that's going from something that's okay in C2 to something that to industrial. So you can't do that. But this is going from a C2 business to a C2 business. So if just
Sure.
take any other non-conforming use commercial business in a residential property, if that place shuts down, the flower store shuts down and turns around and opens up a bakery a month later, is that allowed?
Are you asking me the question?
I'm asking
Yes.
the question.
Yes, and sure.
To me, this is the same thing.
And I would say that, and I'm just adding, I'm not, arguing with you or debating you on it. And I would just say that, just like Board of Zoning Appeals reviews the use and they're under certain criteria, they're looking at setbacks and things, which you'll have next month. You'll have a setback, review next month because of, constraints imposed on site. But as far as use goes, uses tend to be very site specific. All the other information around it is just historical information for the board and helping them to make a decision on it. So, in this case, it specifically states in the zoning ordinance that this board can look at a use and whether or not it is compatible or more compatible for that neighborhood.
I think it comes down to how you define use. It's gonna get
Yeah,
a little hairy, because you're almost going down to the exact, whether it is a boutique retail store or a bakery retail store. Some of us are trying to figure out what point does it jump from use to a different classification
sure.
for us to consider. And I think that's what the way I was looking at it, it's a retail establishment.
Going to a retail.
And to me, I think your argument, the chairman's argument is, it doesn't need a variance. They can go right back in within 30 months and create it.
Okay.
I think that's what I hear.
And
the
that's
position
that's
is.
what I'm hearing as well. That's what I'm understanding is that it's not basically the decision is that it is not an expansion of the nonconformity. It's it
Correct.
It's a
fits
continuation
within,
of the non.
it fits within it, which is what, my point to that, which is that section of the code, because.
I'll go back to something that happened many years ago. There's a piece of property kind of back behind the post office that someone wanted to do something similar, and they had a great plan. It was residential, but they wanted to put a retail building in their doctor's offices and make it look nice.
Mhm.
And the board told them no, because that was a C2 use. And C2 just means C2. I don't care if it's a doctor's office or a gas station or a laundromat.
Sure.
C2 is C2. So that's why in my eyes, if it's going from a C2 use
To
to another
C2.
C2 use.
And I'm not arguing it because I am opposed to this.
Sure.
Because personally, I think it's appropriate. Because you'll see more and more mixed uses, or you'll see on either collectors or arterials that neighborhood style, which is why I pointed to the C3 zoning district, because it's compatible with the C3. Typically, C3 zoning district, which is a neighborhood, and that's the scale of that property and that use is very compatible with the uses around it. And
So how do we as a board give you what you need? Do we need to just make a motion that we affirm, if that's what the board wants to do, that it is continuing with the C2 use, which is compatible with that area?
I think it go back to the definition that it is not an expansion or changing to another non-conforming use, that you may make that finding, and therefore variance is not required. And they would be allowed under general law to continue or to go back in and do a business as long as they do it within that 30, is it 30 or 36?
30 months.
30.
I don't know why it's 30.
Well, I thought they had moved it to 36 for some reason. Maybe that's industrial. Is that what industrial?
Yeah.
Anyway, you could do that, and instead of giving the variance. This is such a different, because you're applying a different part of the zoning ordinance. Some of those things that don't meet the standards that don't meet almost aren't even applicable to the application. Almost,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't meet it, you're like, that actually doesn't even apply to this property. So I wouldn't worry about that. So if you still think you need, if you disagree with what the chairman has said and his interpretation, and feel like I'm talking to the rest of the board. If they disagree, I'm just saying, if they disagree with that interpretation and feel like they need to keep a better hold on anything like this that comes in the future.
Sure.
And they do think it is an expansion and a change of use, and they think a variance should be considered, then I'm just saying several of those things that you have found are not satisfied, in my opinion, don't apply. I would even almost take it out.
Yes.
But the very first one, it's not the land and its
that is
it's not
very
applicable
much,
to this application. That's what you normally get for variances. Variances are usually not on use. They're on something else.
And just like Ginger said too, even on item 10, it says variance standard is not applicable. I think I would have felt better if those other standards said not applicable instead of not applied.
Okay.
Right. But you all could make all of those findings here. I just wanted to make that statement because
Sure.
I've not really heard from the other members of the board.
Sure.
And again, that, my thoughts on the whole thing is the variance isn't even needed. It's that.
Yeah, and maybe it will be helpful because I haven't, mentioned it to this board, but, one of the things that was in our strategic plan is that there, and I don't know what this means, but, there is this perception of bias, amongst staff, of staff. So what I did, with all the other boards, I had this first time for this board, is that the board actually has the authority to make decisions. So rather than, rather than stopping it myself, if it's an authority, especially because since this one has that particular provision in the zoning ordinance for it, because it is kind of bridging over more in planning, I think.
I agree with you. I can understand completely why a planning director would feel like this may be something that does need to go in front of the BZA on that. And I know why, because of the supplementary. Some of the other uses in a C2 or retail do not have supplementary regulations. So I understand completely why you feel that way.
And I agree with that too. I just, like I said, I think that, I don't know that we necessarily had in our zoning laws or just, like the conversation we're having versus calling it a variance or whatever, but anyways. So.
Sounds like you have a decision then.
So we have a couple of options. One, we can discuss the variance and vote on the variance. Or we can entertain a motion that we do not find that there is an expansion of use and,
Expansion or change of use.
an expansion or change of use. And
That requires.
that requires a variance. And that, what they're looking to do falls under the guidelines of the law, continuing on their non-conforming piece of property.
As long as they've done it within 30 months.
Cool.
Make a motion. Looks like at this point, we really don't need a variance.
So I have a motion to, do you have that wording?
Yes.
We'll entertain, a second? Second? Let's, do a roll call vote.
So the motion is that we do not find, the board does not find that there is an expansion or change of use that requires a variance in this instance. That they're continuing with the current non-conforming use. So if you agree with that motion, when I call your name, you'll say yes. Member Patterson?
Yes.
Member Perkins?
Yes.
Member Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilmember Noel?
Yes.
Chairman Williams?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other business?
No, sir.
I guess one other thing, isn't there a training, is that next?
Yes, sir. There is a training. It's going to be before the planning commission next Thursday night at 5 o'clock.
That's correct.
Here in this room. BZA members are required to have 4 hours of training a year. So this is a 1 hour training. If you're able to come next Thursday at 5 o'clock, then you'll get your hour of training. The actual subject matter is going to be delivered by our water, electric, he works for the Shelbyville Power Company. He's a whiz at sewer. I'm not sure exactly what he's going to be talking about, but John Freeman, he's very knowledgeable.
John will be speaking about the TDEC permit, that allows us to draw a certain amount of water, but he's also gonna discuss, the capacity of the water system. Since there seems to be a lot of questions on that part of it.
No other business, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
We are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. I laid it. I don't know.
My record is 11.
I hate that. Everything's happening. Everything is right there together.
Yeah.
When I get on, I mean, it's our way to.
Yeah, certainly.